So, you very lucky people are about to hear Patrick Debois. Patrick is the product dev rel at Tessle and the curator of AINativeDev.io. Did you also have a hand in the app?
No.
No, that wasn't you.
All credits
Sorry.
to Popey.
Oh,
Popey,
he's upstairs, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Known as the father of DevOps. Mm. Coined and termed the first organized DevOps Day in Ghent in 2009 and co-author of DevOps Handbook.
This was generated by an LLM.
Yeah. I can tell by the long dash.
Yeah.
Anyway, today he's going to be talking to us about coding agents don't scale themselves, and neither do your teams. The rise of agent enablement. Give it up for Patrick.
Thank you for coming. Disclaimer, this talk was first started on Friday, so it's a brand new talk, basically because the guy stole all my thunder on the CDLC, so I had to come up with a new talk. So it's a little bit experimental, but we'll get through that. So he here has kind of like the struggle of scaling agentic coding within their organizations. Who kind of like has to deal with that problem? My kind of people, right? Cool. So development is changing, and I think the best phrase to say it is, we're not building the thing, we're building the thing that builds the thing. That's kind of the new mentality. And left and right, kind of I curate the program, so there's a little bit of a sprinkle of context that you might hear in skills, a little bit of harness engineering that is in there. But it is pieces of the puzzle that are largely technology pieces right now. But I'm going to talk at what does it mean to use those pieces. So one of the things is everybody's reinventing the wheel, which is great with a new technology coming about because you're all learning, but it's not sustainable. Every time, first DevOps, everybody was building their own deploys. Cloud, everybody was building their own S3. That is not sustainable, right? That's not what we want to go for. But, enablement, and you all know the term developer enablement, it doesn't happen by itself. You have a team for that. You have people that kind of actively nurture that within your org, and that is the job that I want to describe. Not about how you become a better agentic coding per se, but how do you scale this out? And the good news is you already know how, right? Which is, and you'll see that in the talk, everything that's good for humans that we've been advocating for years on good engineering practices is actually good for agents. And what's good for agents seems to be good for people, right? Because maybe it's because the LLMs have been mirrored on our behavior, and maybe that's that. But maybe we got some pieces right. And it's not just about vibe coding that, hey, I build an app, but how do I make the app sustainable, work, secure, all those pieces. And that's where engineering kicks in again. So this probably could be a 2-hour talk, but I got 20 minutes left. We're going to enable the agents. That's what a lot of people talk about. I want to talk briefly also, what do you do to enable the team? What goes into the platform? And how do you think about this agentic piece in the organization? So, first piece, enable the agents. How do you make it work? Like DevOps, we've come up with a new term. The AI product engineer. It wasn't enough that we called them AI engineers, because that was confusing. Is it AI in the product? Is it AI for software? All of a sudden, we have a new term, the AI product engineer. Hey, they're customer-focused. Shouldn't our devs have been customer-focused? Nothing new. But the nice thing for me is it's another silo bust. That kind of, I set requirements, I figure out what we need to build, and that how to build it is kind of blending into worlds, which is nice. Now, the way that I want people to think, and I mentioned build the thing that builds the thing, one of the mindset challenges that people have is even if the agent gets things wrong, they jump in and they correct the mistake. What they really should be doing is improving the system that builds the code and improve that so they don't have to do it again. So it's not about fix the code and fix the system. And a lot of system engineers and platform people, they think in system mentality, and that's why it's also quite natural to kind of think in those terms. It's, for me, right now in the industry, still one of the predominant mistakes is that you still go in and jump in and correct and take over. The mentality should change to fix the system and have the agentic flow do that. So I mentioned what good looks like. Claude learned that we should have planning before doing something. We should have testing to see whether the agent did something well or not, or whether it pulled a trick and changed functionality that we didn't want. I always say, I never knew I would see the day that developers would start writing documentation on their own. But they learned that actually by writing specs or whatever you call it, context, all of a sudden things become better. And then if you add observability, the agents can actually kind of observe themselves and improve, right? Nothing new. It's just rehashed with the new mindset. It's now the agents doing that stuff. Okay, so that reusability comes into not changing the context and the prompts. You think about reusable specs, kind of make that, and that goes to both harness, components, tools, make them reusable. Now, it's very tempting to not listen to whatever happens in the production. And yes, as a dev, you've never been used to, you've been told, the only thing that matters is how your end user is having issues. And those have been signals that we've been trying to educate that, whenever you see a signal that it's not performing well, change the system and improve that. So that is how you have to think about that. Smaller tasks, no surprise there. Big task, the agent goes in all directions, that's true. And then you measure actually before that happens. The funny part is, everybody builds their own context. Well, I have my Claude MD, and you see the copy and paste being told on the internet, use this, use that. Not sustainable, right? So what you want to do is you want to standardize a library within your team, within your code base. No shared harness. I shouldn't say this, but within Tessle, we have now 5 or 6 harnesses being built, which is great for learning, but probably only a few should survive after that is done, because that is useful. You have to maintain the specs. It's not the one thing. It will change. It will not be up to date. And eventually, another problem that we're facing is, as we're putting more pieces, you go to your triage ticket system, your kind of maybe reviews, your customer database, all those pieces have not been set up well for access control. It's a running problem that we have. We're getting better at that. There's maybe some new specs that come around, but this is what it gets hard. So we've learned about this, kind of just limit the kind of the blast wall of everything that you're doing for agents. So that's the same thing as we would do before for users. If there's one mindset change that I want, almost what do you tell a developer right now in agentic coding that's already agentic coding? I would stress this. Every time you do something, think about not repeating this again. And this was the mentality also for DevOps automation. Whatever we do, it works on my machine, it works with my agent, it works on my Snowflake machine or anything. It is, make it repeatable. And that kind of gets you in a motion of improvement. I hope no surprises there so far, right? But what about the team? There's the team lead that now, what is their job? So they're not only helping the humans, but they're helping the agents as well now. Because they're team members, right? Kind of that mentality of going through is important. Because basically what I think they're going to be accountable for is, where in the past, and that's still important, developers' performance and kind of what they deliver and the quality and all those pieces. But increasingly, it's also what their agents, how well they're performing. because they're part of that system as well. You can say this is the quality if you own like a microservice system. This is also your ownership of whatever piece that you're building. But now the tools that you're building to build the thing is also a piece of your responsibility that you should be tracking as well. What's good for AI is good for humans. Clear goals. You want to have token spend go up through the roof? Just tell it something vague. Right? Want to run it overnight and see what it did? All the things that it spent, not useful, right? Sharing the context and kind of no surprises. Like keep it like predictable what you're going with a goal that you're going for. Now, some of the new practices, and that's kind of what I'm like challenging myself with. I could tell you a generic transformation story in a company and say, well, developers need to use more AI. Let's do a hackathon, give everybody a tool. Great, like, we're self-gratulating ourselves. But what is changing? And here's a few kind of new things, like pair coding. There's almost like the pair context writing. What's your style? What do you put in? What is important? So kind of that is team dynamics. What is the definition of done? Is it the code is going out, or was there more to it? Is that the agent doing its best and how that's performing, that becomes part of your definition of done? So you need a kind of metric, and one of the metrics that I really like is how many turns does an agent need to do the right thing? If you start measuring that, you're actually looking at how efficient am I feeding, how efficient is my harness, to make that a better optimization in that. Much like you would look at your team members, how do you kind of make them work together well? And some teams, similar to their retro, how did we work, is how did our agents work? And they do that at the end, and then they feed back into the next cycle. So very similar, but quite concrete of what people are doing now in those kind of team dynamics. The velocity metrics are great, but there's more to it, right? There's rework, there's like the turns of the agentic things. You gotta educate people, because not everybody's an excellent writer in skills and prose. So that is education, much like you would do training for people regular coding. And one of the kind of hard challenges is they used to be the coding rock star. You kind of have to translate them almost into, you're the amazing context provider that tells the agents, which is the great like agent whisperer, right? Because that is what you're aiming, like want to get them into. Not everybody wants to do it, they still want to deal with the code, but it's also a great way to have almost the skeptics, if they say, AI can't do what I do, all right, maybe you can write down what it is you do, that we can make the agents better, right? And that kind of shared library has also kind of a little bit of a challenge. If you put it in the repo, and it's like, yeah, it's in the repo, but it's the common grounds, which has pro and cons. Like who has the ownership of certain pieces, of libraries, of skills, and other pieces. So if I want to get them in a new mind shift, team leaders should think about like, my agents are team members too. How do I find the goal, a KPI? How do I measure the performance? How do I make them play well with my team? And all those pieces, everything you already know, but kind of on a different level now with the agents. All right, let's scale this out. We got like one developer, few developers team, enable a platform. Scale this out in the org. It's a very common pattern. Every time a new technology, we had the Agile team, we had the DevOps team, we have the Agent Enablement team. It's the incubation team that starts to change. And then maybe we mimic that into a next team, and eventually we think, maybe we should put them everything in a shared layer, and we don't have everybody doing the boilerplate over and over again. That's that. So these people build for the team that builds the thing, right? And I think they're the natural people who will think about optimizing the whole, Great, I got skills, but how do they work together across teams? Can they be reused across teams? I write my Claude MD, but can I reuse pieces of that? I have a harness and a pipeline. Can I make that reusable? So that's their mindset. The other mindset that we don't have yet enough is, and I've been asking for AI coding vendors for like many times. I go to a booth, and it's like, all right, you're great. So you're getting all the feedback, agents are improving. Do you do any learning of things it does in prod? We don't have a question for that. There's no requests about people learning about this. And you end up being in another group of vendors who talks about AI within the platform, and they do all the AI observability. But combining both is apparently the same mistake, as we're not learning from what was put into the wild. We think putting in the wild was within our test environment at the test run, but it was not about what went into the coding. So the other piece I do is, hey, I need a memory. I need other pieces that all the agents share, a backbone. That's what they're going to provide. Not every team is going to build that infrastructure. Right now, that's what they do, because they're experimenting, they're learning, it's okay, but eventually that will sync somewhere centrally. So what does a good platform look like? What's good for people is good for AI. Self-serve. If you think about like somebody going through hoops of copying skills and so on, they just want to simply pull in, done, right? That friction needs to be very nice. You want to put the best practices in place. Maybe we have some evals, security scanning, all those pieces that if they have to do it, they have to do it all themselves. You want to make that the easy path of something they pull from that sys, or when they push their context. Monitoring, right? Agent observability of what your coding agents are doing across the whole organization. Do you want every team to spin up their own kind of monitoring and observability? No, just use a central tool, because then we can find insights and learn what is missing from context and what are pieces that are missing that we should address and find maybe some new skills for, or have a new tool that address it. That central view is used because it will kind of transcend the knowledge across the organization and not just your team. And then putting the guardrails in place. So this brings things to, well, we had a registry to put our code, so we can have a registry for our skills, and we want it to be versioned, and we will have a registry for MCP, skills, harnesses, agents, agent pipelines. It doesn't matter. It's the same pattern. Discoverability, somewhere central, reusable, self-serve to pull this in. We'll have gateways. One of the first pieces that product people put in place when using AI is a gateway and an MCP and so on. For coding, we're like, we can bring it. But once you start putting a harness of agents that work together, you say, no, now we need an MCP gateway. We need the observability. We need all those pieces in place. And the eval platform, do that centrally. And then ownership, right? When you're in a platform team, there's kind of this repos that everybody shares to your repositories, usually, and then there's the one that kind of get like abandoned, and nobody knows, right? Remember the times that we had to like buy tools that actually searches all our repos? Are they still active? Are they still maintained? Who owns this? It's the same piece there as well. One of the challenges is much like, hey, you should write tests. That's a great idea. Sure, I'll do it after my project when I have time. It's the same excuse. Let me write evals. Well, I'll do that after the project when I have like things. Making that easy, making that self-serve is definitely something your platform team can help with. Now, one of the challenges, and I think it was mentioned this morning, I build a skill, that's great. I want to share that with somebody else. They'll look at it as like, yeah, I like it for 99%. Let me kind of change that one bit, and then it becomes a fork. That same mentality is like you want to roll your own, but you want to make it extensible, right? So you want to make sure that everybody's contributing to that central place. And then you need to have a way not just to test it when it's within the mind of the developers, but you also need to do the maintenance. Is it still secure? Is it still optimizing when I change the model? It's similar to when an external kind of company changes the API and you didn't change anything in your code, but all of a sudden your tests are failing. This is the same thing that you're trying to do, but now for skills, for harnesses, and pieces there as well. As long as you don't have that testing and that repeatable thing in place, you will have that same problem. And so the no ownership of shared components is that whenever somebody pushes, is that like, you have to ask, who owns this? Who's going to maintain this? Who has the budget to do this? That is kind of the questions you go from there. And I think their mindset should be, you're a really, really special person, but the way you work isn't. And I'm sorry to break it to you, right? So I don't know how many people told me this DevOps thing, yeah, we can't do it in our org. Like, we're special. You don't understand how we work. Guess what? After a while, everybody can do it, right? That mentality of breaking this is the same thing with pipelines. Well, you know what? It was there, like, let me compile a kernel because I know exactly what I need. Who cares? Like, it's a VM. It spins up. It's great, right? I'm not saying you shouldn't think, but it should be more deliberate where you kind of put the customization in place and that. You always see this with people saying like, oh, I really need to have my coding agent really fast. And then they guess what? Like, oh, it runs in the background. I don't care that much. I want to have it like produce the right results, not that it's like instant feedback so I can reply to it in the real time. So kind of that is looking out for those things. Last layer, enable the organization. So more towards the VP engineering. So, okay, their job, build the org that builds for the teams, that builds the thing. And I think this is probably the broadest enablement role of them all. And right now, we're kind of struggling. What do we put in place? We give everybody the tools. Great. Okay, and now what? All right, let's monitor the spend of everybody. And it's kind of challenging in that. So I think where previous job, and I'm not saying it's going to be replaced, they should still hire engineers, they should ship reliable and at sustainable pace. But I think they need to work on how do you enable the system. Is that people creating tickets flowing easily into what the agent has accessible? Maybe the platform team cannot unlock it until a VP comes in and say, let me unlock kind of these groups, and you have to kind of work together, which is like two children on a playground, but you get the idea. What does a good organization look like? What's good for people is good for AI. I'm clear, this is my piece. You're responsible, you're going to improve this, because ownership drives improvement, and otherwise it just could fall between the cracks. If team A needs to do this and team B needs to do that, you're aligning kind of the direction of the different teams. And that's your work on doing this. And the sustainable pace is, well, if one team is completely overproducing all the rest, and they can't look at all the changes, you kind of have to balance. Which team is still struggling? Which team needs investment in education? Which team kind of need to maybe have some help from the platform team to kind of set up their whole new environment. And then you want to, of course, worry about the cost as well. So kind of putting that like investment clear, that it is beyond I am buying licenses for all my tools. Like what is the investment on education? What is the investment of kind of improving the pipeline, monitoring how well they're performing, and how much do I care about that? That is the tipping point between just saying, here's a bunch of tools, run with it, I don't know, between I care, I set a direction, this is where I will measure you as a productivity, like how much is it redoing the same thing, how much efficiency are you getting through there as well. And then you put the governance in place. I think it was mentioned already a few times. The skills, the context. Who gets access to what? Do you mandate that they have to be security scanned? Do you kind of see whether you only allowed almost like approved skills, almost like when we did with registries? You're only allowed to use these because they've been vetted, and the other ones we're not doing. But we can bring them in. We have a process of bringing external skills internally and kind of bringing out that. And then we set the KPIs, and I know this still sounds a little bit vague, and that's kind of what I'm working on. Like, if you have any kind of specific advice, more tailored to context and all those pieces, that's kind of what I'm trying to describe on the enablement instead of the vague things. But we do know that you want to have a KPI for agent quality as well, instead of only the quality of what is your measurement, because it's an integral part of your system. As usual, VPs struggle to say, I'm going to invest with this, but the business doesn't care, because you need to have return now. So that's why you need to make it visible. You need to make the pain visible, and that was the same with security. If you can't show how many vulnerabilities you're having, how much that risk is telling, that you can't actually start justifying the return on investment only by saying, are we 2x, 10x? I don't know. Oh, looks good to me. Ship it. So that's not the mentality that we're going for. So we want to avoid the quick wins award and actually make that enablement team much like a platform team. It requires an investment to go for. Unfortunately, there is no playbook. And that's kind of the challenging part, is like, okay, we're all learning while we go, and it's a very kind of unsatisfactory thing. But I think layer by layer, that's the improvement. So if you already set the step on the investment, you'll go through it and kind of say, the mental model that I usually use is that if you have a barrel and there are all the sides that are held together, if you do any automation in the past with DevOps, if you have one piece of the barrel that is very low, the water will pour through there. So I think the trick is you go on step by step on all the phases. You improve part of the governance, part of the automation, and you go that by layer. Instead, if you automate everything and you don't have your governance in place, that doesn't make sense. And that's my pet peeve. Continuous integration, continuous delivery, and I think with all the context that we're accumulating and the tools, we're basically learning how to do our craft better and to learn how fast we can do things. And in a world where it's almost important to swap in and swap out new technology as they become like a business edge, you have to think about, like, how fast can I adopt something new? It's where continuous delivery was, how can I deliver the existing, maybe more stable, and like in that way. But right now, it is about accumulating knowledge within the org, across all the teams, how your business is going to get better and build better and more reliable tools. And for me, that is the step of continuous learning. I'm working on this side. Yes, it's on the Tessle. But what I actually do is I have an agent. Of course, I have an agent. That looks at all the social posts and tries to distill those into patterns. Now, there are challenges, because there's vendors who say, this is how you do things, which I'm trying to find a system that ignores the vendors. But sometimes vendors are good, because they have a good idea. But I try to also find multiple sources about doing the same thing. And when I find that, the challenge then is, are they just referring to the same article, like Brigitte's, like, hey, this is how you do all the things? So I have to find out, like, what is their thinking? Is there a similarity in that? So I'm trying to automate this, and it's basically a research tool for me, and I hope it's interesting for you as well, to just find what people are doing in the industry. Because I think surveys right now are just too slow. Right? We can't wait until everybody says like, oh, we're adapting, we're just on Copilot, all good, and that's it. So in a nutshell, that's what I would say is an agent enablement. If you're interested in kind of like sharing maybe some of your stories, what you learned, how you framed, how you help kind of the mindset change, how do you think it's changing your teams, ceremonies, how do you think about the problem, how do you defend it to maybe your CFO? I love to hear your stories, and if you want to have the slides, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll happily share my slides in exchange for feedback, because that's what good developers do. Thank you very much.